Thanks, Rachel, and thank you all for joining us and having me tonight. We're going to start. I shared when I chose this topic, um, many serendipitous things happened, and one of them was I acquired a book, and in it had this poem that I thought spoke very well to this topic. And Allison's going to share that with us as a starting point.
Yes, I'm just going to read it to you guys, if that's okay. The poem is called No Way, the 100 is There. The child is made of 100. The child has 100 languages, 100 hands, 100 thoughts, 100 ways of thinking, of playing, of speaking. 100, always 100 ways of listening, of marveling, of loving, 100 joys, for singing and understanding, 100 worlds to discover, 100 worlds to invent, 100 worlds to dream. The child has 100 languages and 100 more, but they steal 99. The school and the culture separate the head from the body. They tell the child to think without hands, to do without head, to listen and not to speak, to understand without joy, to love and to marvel only at Easter and Christmas. They tell the child to discover the world already there, and of the 100, they steal 99. They tell the child that work and play, reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dream are things that do not belong together. And thus they tell the child that the 100 is not there. The child says, No way, the 100 is there. By Loris Malaguzzi.
Thanks, Allison. I agree. I love that poem. When I read it, I had to keep rereading it because I just found it to be so powerful, and also really spoke to what I try and encourage staff and volunteers to do in our relief nursery classrooms, of allowing children to explore and express in whatever language they need to use. So to start us off, I'd kind of like to hear from each of you what drew you to this particular topic and training. And I'll start with what drew me to choose this topic tonight. When Rachel approached me and said, "Oh, will you do a training, Nancy?" I said, "Well, of course, what do you want me to talk about?" And she said, "I don't care, you pick," which was super daunting for me. And I probably went through, I don't know, Rachel, maybe did we go through 5 to 10 different topics, and finally said, okay, this is going to be the one. And I'm not changing again. You can put the title out there, so I can't change. And why I chose it was because recently a very good friend of mine and mentor and colleague, we were having a conversation, and I was just spouting off about working with kids, and as I do, and I made the comment about behavior is language. And she looked at me and she said, wait, what? Say that again? And I thought, that is just a normal statement for me, and I hadn't really stopped to think about it in a while, since I had kind of adopted that as one of my philosophies. But she made me, because it seems so new and foreign to her, and she wanted more information, I had to really rethink it myself. And I thought, oh, maybe this is kind of an interesting topic to delve into with folks. So that's how I came to this topic tonight to share with you. And I'd love to hear what brought you all, or if you have questions around it, so that hopefully I can hit upon those. So yeah, I guess if you'd share that, that'd be great.
We have just a couple people on here. And
muted so far. Is anyone willing to jump in and introduce themselves and kind of share with Nancy? Hi, Megan.
I'm happy to. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you, Megan.
Okay, great. Our internet is unstable, so we can't turn our camera on, but I'm here with my kiddos and I was kind of drawn in by the title and thought behaviors language sounds great. And we have, we just occasionally or weekly have 3 of the Safe Families kiddos with us and thought this might be a helpful training for us. And then my oldest daughter is really interested in volunteering at the Relief Nursery. So we just got drawn in and are excited to hear about the topic.
Great, thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Megan. I know Jean won't be able to chat because she doesn't have a mic.
Okay, and feel free to put in chat if you don't feel like talking. That's always okay. And at any time through my presentation, please feel free to interrupt, ask questions, again, in the chat or verbally. I'm totally okay with that.
Well, I don't mind talking. I didn't really want to turn my video on tonight because I'm not really anything you want to look at right now, but
We've all been there.
Yeah, but anyway, I'm so excited to connect with you guys, and I just have always loved what you do in our county, and I just think it's such an incredible service that you offer, not just to kids, but just the whole family, and I just love it. So I just want to glean and learn. We're quarantining right now because we do have COVID in our house, actually. So this was a good opportunity because I don't have a lot going on, so I'll do as many online trainings as I can right now till I can be a volunteer. So
thank you, Sherry. Thanks for joining us and inviting us into your quarantine life.
Sure.
Getting to the other side of that.
What was that?
I said, good luck getting to the other side of that.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you.
And return to health. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's been a crazy, crazy time, has it not?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I will just kind of delve in then. And like I said, if you have questions, comments, whatever, please feel free to jump in throughout. So as I said, when I started thinking about this topic and having this conversation with my friend and colleague, so many serendipitous things happened, and I kept being bombarded with more and more evidence around this idea that I've had for many years. And it came from really observing children and thinking about language, because that's always been of interest to me, and that language development in children. And then when I got into work with relief nurseries and started learning about trauma and stress reaction, and the thought of when we're triggered or when we're in stress, we go back into our very elemental beings of fight, flight, or freeze, and where language fits in that, because we know that we're no longer in our frontal cortex, so we're not thinking and we're not processing, and that's where a lot of language is. And I thought, but in watching kids, I could see language was still happening in a very loud way that wasn't words. And so I really just started paying attention to that idea. And that's, I think, where I came up with the concept for myself. And then, as I've seen with so many things through my years, science is finally really starting to catch up with concepts and ideas that we were playing around with back in 1980. And that's been really exciting to watch that evolution. And so science now has brought us to this concept of, we're out of our frontal cortex, the thinking's not there when we're in stress, and the idea that stress also takes it back to our original language, with the idea that if your first language is Spanish, when you get into stress, your mind goes back to Spanish. And so I started thinking along that line also, like, okay, if we go back there, then do we also go back further to before we had verbal language? And what was that? Because babies aren't born with language, yet we know what they want and what they need by watching them. So in essence, that's their behavior. And so behavior, and then it just kept feeding into behavior is language, and let's watch the behaviors, and they'll tell us what kids are trying to tell us. One of the other things that came up to me as I was thinking about this, my daughter is a young mom of two littles, a 5-year-old and an 8-month-old. And so we're constantly swapping ideas and whatnot. And she turned me on to an Instagram link, which I am not a social media person. I do Instagram because she's an amazing photographer and it's the only way I see her pictures, because my husband is terrible at remembering to share. Anyway, so she hooked me into this Instagram feed, and I would encourage all of you, if you're Instagram people, it's called Big Little Feelings, all lowercase. And it's two moms, and the focus is birth to 5. And one of their posts that they put up right after I decided on this topic said, reminder in big letters, toddlers are still learning how to verbally say, I'm mad, or I'm feeling lonely, so they are more likely to show you through their physical displays. And I went, oh, wait, there it is again. Behavior is language. And that's kind of how all of their posts are, just little snippets like that. I've shared it with a lot of the relief nursery teachers, and a couple of them have told me they have the posts come up right before they head into class with toddlers as a nice reminder of how it is to be with littles, because they can test our every little patience at times, and they also can bring us great joy. So that's kind of how I came at this concept of behavior is language. And so I've been playing with it in my training of new staff, which I've had a lot of this year, and it's very interesting to try and train people virtually. And hi, Kevin, and thank you for joining us. So I'm gonna paint a little picture for you of an incident that happened on a first day with 2 new staff people. And then I'll talk to you about the conversation that we had following up to help them gain some understanding of the whys behind the observation. Okay, so imagine in your mind, we are out at our brand new Sheridan classroom, just getting that site going, which is super exciting. And I have been in the center with these children once before, probably a month and a half previously, for a short period of time. So these children do not know me, okay? The staff at the time did not know that. Okay, so that little tidbit will play into the observation. So the children are coming off the bus and walking in the door. And as they come in the door with their teacher, who they're very familiar with, there are two unknown adults standing behind their cubbies, looking over the top. There is the assistant teacher standing kind of off to the other side of the cubbies, ready to assist any children that need help getting coats and backpacks and whatever off and ready for the day. And I'm all the way across the room. These adults are all standing. I'm across the room, and the kids that are coming in we were running a respite class that day, so they aged from, I think 20 months to 4 years old. And there were 5 of them. I was across the room, squatted down, and just hanging out. Had no idea what was going to happen, but that's where I was. I had just come out of the kitchen, so I was in the kitchen doorway, squatted down low, just watching, observing. And I noticed one of the little girls come in, and I saw her notice the 2 adults looking over the top of the cubbies, and she immediately did a look and check in with her teacher, and saw that there was no alarm or anything on the teacher. So then she continued to look around, and she saw the other teachers that she kind of recognized. Her attendance had been sporadic, so she wasn't super familiar. And then she saw me across the room, and I caught her eye looking at me. And she caught my eye looking at her. And I smiled, even though I was masked, and I knew she couldn't see that smile. One, it's just instinctual for me when I see kids. But I smiled because I could sense some tension in her, because I was feeling a little tension. Also, there was so many adults, and everybody's standing up here, and these little kids are way down here. And I'm thinking, how would I feel if I were those kids? So I stayed where I was, and she went back to taking her coat off and hanging it up. And a few of the adults that knew her acknowledged her by her name. And as soon as she had her things put away, and so her initial job was done, their task was hang up your stuff, go to circle time. She hung up her things, and she caught my eye again. And I could tell she was going to move by the way she looked at me. And so I just opened my arms, kept my eye on hers, and she just came running over and gave me a big hug. I returned her hug, and then her little friend did the same thing, and I returned her hug, and I told him who I was. And then the first little girl said, will you come to circle with me? And I said, sure, of course, if kids invite me, I will go, unless there's some huge reason I can't. And she took me by the hand, and we sat down, and anyway, the day progressed. So when I was debriefing with the teachers, the new staff, I asked them, what did they see? And they said, we saw all the adults standing tall, and you were across the room, and those kids recognized you and were excited to see you. They had seen that happen in another room where the kids and I know each other. And so they ran to greet you. And I said, I had never met that little girl before. She was not at school the day I was there. And they were both taken aback. Like, so what was it that little girl, why did she come to me? I was the stranger. And so then I turned the question back to them. I said, what did you see me do that you did not see any other adult do? And it came back to behavior. So not only are kids using behavior to talk to us, but it's super powerful for us to use our behavior to talk to them. So what they said they noticed was the fact that I was down at kid level, which is something that I really try hard to always do, because I just think about how frightening we must look. And all adults, and I mean, we had a young man in our class that was 6'5", and I kept telling him, how scary you must be. They don't even come up to your knees. Oh my gosh, you know, and their poor necks are tired of looking up all day. But getting down and letting them know that I think that just speaks to them about we're there for them. I'm on your level with you. But what I really felt from that little girl's eye contact with me was that I gave her recognition as a person. You know, it was kind of like, you know, how people do that. I see you. We were doing that even though we were really far across the room from each other. But it's super powerful. And that's a lot of times all kids want, is to be seen. Just like us adults, we just want to be seen, like, notice that I'm here, that I'm alive, because that's the important thing. They also recognized that after she and I had done our little eye contact, and I noticed her coming over, that I did open up to her, because I had just been like this, you know, just casual, whatever. And as soon as I saw her coming toward me, I opened up, again, letting her know I'm available for you. I'm here for you. I'm going to be a safe person for you. That's what I was thinking about as she was coming across. I was also feeling pretty darn good that, whoo, I made that connection so darn fast with that little girl. And we are going to have so much fun today in her class because we've already connected. So that power of my behavior to her and hers to me, we had a whole conversation across a room without ever talking. And think about how many times as adults we do that. How many times as teenagers, man, I got away with that all the time in school, you know? You'd have that conversation with your friend across the room and eyes rolling and whatnot. And it's all that idea of behavior being language. I don't know. I'm curious as to if anything's coming up for people in what I'm saying, or there's any questions. Yeah, I want to kind of turn it to you guys for a little bit.
Nancy, one of the things that I'm thinking about listening to what you're sharing is just how we learn, if behavior is language, and we learn our behaviors from the other people that we are surrounded with. When you think about a lot of the families that we're serving, and the fact that these kids are communicating to us through their behaviors, but their behaviors are learned through families who generationally perhaps have not learned the most positive of behaviors, how does that affect, you know, the ripple effect
Right.
that has?
That's so interesting, because that just came up in a classroom I was in this week. Little girl, just turned 3, has perfected the behavior of the whimper and the whine when things don't quite go her way. And she can, you know how kids can turn it on and off. So you know that the depth of it is not the same as a big hurt. It's like, you know, I didn't quite get what I wanted, and boy, this works with mom or this works with dad, and so here we go, right down the tantrum hole. And all of the adults kind of looked at each other and went, wow, oh, you can tell that one works at home. I mean, it was just that obvious to all of us. And then I had to rethink. Like I took a minute, because that was my first response too. Like, okay, that's a learned behavior, and we're going to ignore that learned behavior because it's not what we would consider appropriate. And there's the whole concept of ignoring behaviors to change them. And I went, wait a second. If behavior is language, yes, she's learned that that particular behavior says this to mom and gets that kind of response. It's not going to get the same response here, but she's still trying to tell me something. And so I need to listen to what she's telling me rather than flippantly think, ooh, that's a learned behavior, which is where we all instantly went. Human nature, I think. But when I turned it a little bit and thought, wait a second, she's still trying to tell me something, maybe not in the way that I think is appropriate or the way that I would like her to. How is that any different, really, than a real tantrum, even though it's that whole concept of, but that one's a learned response. She still has something to say, and I still need to pay attention to whatever it is she's trying to tell me. So rather than ignore that whiny, ooh, that's, I gotta say, that's my button behavior, I went to her and just tried to acknowledge the feeling. That's the other thing we do in the relief nursery, is go to the feeling rather than the behavior. And so I tried to employ that concept of her behavior is telling me something about her feeling right now. She doesn't want to do this. It was give up her turn on the swing. She did not want to give up her turn on the swing. I get it. Who wants to share? You know, I'm loving it. I want to stay on the swing. And so I thought, okay, rather than ignore her or try and get her to behave a different way that I think would be much more appropriate way for her to say, I don't want to give up the darn swing. You're making me mad. I thought, you know what? I'm just going to talk to her and be there for her in that feeling of frustration and, oh my gosh, it's that big person making me do something I don't want to do once again. And once I went there with her and just kind of behaviorally, I tried to take on her affect a little bit of being sad and frustrated. And then I just started verbalizing that for her. You know, your body's looking like you're really sad. I can hear you're trying to tell me you don't want to share the swing. And so I try and then give kids the words that their behaviors are telling us, or that I think. It's all a guessing game. I think so much of work with kids is a guessing game. You try it and you try it, and ooh, I hit the nail on the head this time. And so we were finally able to bring her around to, yep, I'm super frustrated. Yep, I don't want to give up the swing, but I will, because you acknowledged the other part and what my behavior was trying to tell you. And you kind of joined me in that sadness and then helped me move beyond it. And we really didn't have much conversation because I knew she wasn't in a place where she could have conversation. She was, as they say, her lid was flipped. She was going to fight and keep that spot on that swing. So conversation wouldn't have worked. But by kind of joining her in that feeling through my behavior, like bringing on that, oh man, so sad. God, I don't want to give up the swing either. Helped her kind of get like, oh, okay, that is all right to feel that way. And then by giving her another way to express it, I believe we'll have to do that 1,000 times with that particular child. But that's okay too. But that was so interesting. Yeah, that we all just jumped to this conclusion of, oh my gosh, that's just such a learned behavior, rather than remembering that she had a story to tell us. And so when we stopped and looked at the story, then the outcome became really different, I think. Yeah. Allison, I see you have your hand up. I think that feature is so funny. I always kind of laugh every time.
Jean just texted me. Her name up there is her last name. But she was wondering if you could share your input or your thoughts on what to tell or what to do with kids that don't seem to understand stranger danger.
Yeah. Wow, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And a scary one. In fact, I've often told parents that have very shy, cautious children, be thankful and lucky, because I think that's easier than those that have no caution.
Mm-hmm.
And we've all seen those kids also. What I have learned, or one thought about that, is it goes back to attachment theory, and that children that do that haven't had an adult consistently prove to them that the adult will keep them safe. And so they're continually challenging that. Now, if I do this, are you going to be there and keep me safe? And if I do this, are you still going to keep me safe? I'll tell you, we had a child like this in the nursery at one time. And we were all pretty scared for this little boy. At 18 months, he climbed out a window onto a second floor roof and was ready to jump. That was one of many super scary things that he did. And running away, running into the street, those were real, constant. And at first we tried the tactic with him and in working with the parents of kind of, clamp me down and we got to be safe. And then we kind of pulled back and went, wait, this is about attachment. And this little boy has never had an adult that made him feel safe. And so we're going to come at it from that direction rather than clamp down hard. And so we started with mantras constantly. Everything was tied back to safety. I'm here to keep you safe. Wow, that really scared me because I was worried about your safety. The reason your safety is important is because you're important. I love you no matter what. You're important to me. It's important to me that you don't get hurt. It's important to me that you stay safe. And my job is to do that for you. Because the other thing is that we have seen with children is they, if the adult it doesn't feel like the adult's keeping them safe, then they feel like they have to keep themselves safe and they don't know how to do that. And so relieving them of that pressure of having to be the one to keep them safe. I see this a lot in siblings when that attachment doesn't happen very well with adults and the older sibling takes on that role of keeping the younger safe. We've had numerous conversations with kids in classrooms about, my job is to keep baby brother safe. This is the place you can be a kid. You don't have to carry that burden while you're here. I'm going to hold that job. So just those kind of mantras with kids about, one, their importance to you and that you'll be there no matter what. And just re-showing them every single time that you take an action to ensure their safety, say those things out loud to them, and always include, it's because you matter. It's because you matter. Kids don't hear that enough, and many of the children that I'm sure safe families are seeing and that we're seeing in the relief nursery, they don't have a belief in that. And so the more we can help them believe that they are important and they matter, regardless of how outrageous their behavior is, regardless of how scary their behavior might be, they still matter. No matter how many times they push our buttons, they still matter. The other thing I think about, because as adults, we can't get it right all the time. And so, and I don't get it right all the time. But what I've seen also is that when we get it wrong and then take the time to fix it with the kids, we've now solidified that relationship. Man, I blew it. I acted or said what in a hurtful way. I'm really sorry. And then all of a sudden the kids are going, wow, big people make mistakes too. How amazing is that? It's not just me being like a kid and not getting it, but who, that big person made the mistake too and can admit to it and apologize for it. What a powerful lesson. Not only that they matter enough that a big person would own that, but then think about the consequence down the road of, isn't that the kind of adults we want these kids to grow up to be, that they can admit to mistakes and learn and grow from them? So yeah, I hope that kind of gave you some insight into what you were asking, and I didn't kind of go off on some crazy tangent, but that's what I have for you on those runaway kids. They are hard because they are button pushers, because that safety is huge.
Yeah. Megan did. Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, Allison.
Megan's comment, I don't know if you saw it, Nancy. She said that is super helpful. Her mic's not working right now, but saying out loud is a really good reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Rachel, it looked like you had something you were gonna say or ask.
What you said about the being able to recognize and verbalize your mistakes to a child really resonates with me, because that's something I've definitely experienced with my 10-year-old, where I just see night and day difference in the way that she responds to me and acts with me. If I can just step up to the plate and say, hey, I'm a human too, and I made a mistake, I'm acknowledging that, her respect. For me, it's visible. But another thing that I was thinking about is talking about children that physically run away, but children also emotionally run away.
Mm-hmm. That's an interesting one too. And I don't know how many of you know of the parenting curriculum called Circle of Security. It's one that I think is amazing, and I would encourage all of you to take that if you haven't. It's a philosophy versus thou shalt do this if the child does that. Anyway, it's a philosophy that we incorporate into the nursery, and the concept is that children need to go out to learn and explore, but they also need to come back to us for that security and that safety piece. And I've totally lost where I was going with that. Rachel, tell me again what you asked me. Sorry about that.
You're talking about the circle of security, which yes, is absolutely an amazing theory. But my comment was just noting how children not only physically will run away, but emotionally.
Okay. Got where I was going.
Back on the circle.
Back on the circle. Thank you. So about a year ago, we were looking into bringing Circle of Security into our classrooms. They've developed a new classroom curriculum versus a parenting curriculum, which was super exciting to me. And so in the training of what that would look like, they had videoed some classrooms that they had worked with, some relief nursery classrooms. And this one particular scene that they shared was that, and in the home, same thing, that horrific, chaotic, it's time to get everyone to the table and we have to wash hands and we have to like make sure whatever you were doing is put away, but now it's time for dinner and oh my God, it's going to get cold and then we got to get to this. And so it was that kind of time frame. And there was a child curled up fetal position under a table, not where they were eating. And the adults in the video chose to leave that child with the thought that the child was meeting their needs by finding their space alone. And so they were going to honor that. And I watched this video the whole time, seeing no adults engage with that child. And my heart was just breaking for that child, because I look at things from the kid's perspective and I'm thinking, here's a kid who's obviously hurting inside, that he has to be in the fetal position under a table and no one's seeing him. So that emotional running away. And we're so often, yes, it was chaotic and there was kids not doing what they were supposed to. All the adults were engaged with another child that needed to be engaged with. Don't get me wrong, but this child really needed an adult to see them, in my opinion, because they were feeling so invisible. And so then as we debriefed with the group that was receiving this training about this, it was real interesting because Kara Copeland was there, who you said has done a training, and she's actually who hired me. And so they're going around and everybody's talking about what a wonderful job the teachers had done with all the other chaos that was going on, which they really had. And it came to my turn and I said, that was so hard for me to watch. And it took all the other adults back, except the two trainers. And I could see them kind of lean in like, ooh, I wonder what she's going to say about this. And I said, that child under the table, I was crying with him. And I said, I'd have just been right under that table with him. Even if he was saying the whole time, go away, I want to be alone, I want to be alone, I want to be alone. We've all heard kids do that. But what his behavior was telling me is, I am so hurt inside and I am so invisible, I have to be under this table because I'm not worthy enough, I'm not okay enough for you to even see me. That's what I felt emanating from that child. And Kara just looked at the trainers and the rest of the people in the room and just said, yeah, well, that's how Nancy would look at that. But in essence, I had just had that experience with a child in our relief nursery who immediately entered the room and hid. And I did that. I went and we laid under the carpet together, and when he settled, I finally started just narrating what we were seeing and where I was watching his eyes go. And I would just say, oh, I see you're looking at so-and-so and they're doing this. Wondering if that's interesting to you. And just by following his gaze, I knew the things that were important to him. And he was finally able to say, or after I had seen him gaze all around to everything, and then I said, are you ready? And I just held out my hand. And he came out and we played the rest of the day. But just by really listening to that behavior of his, and of those super quiet, they're hard to hear because the runners and the jumpers off the high places and the tantrumer, the one hurting other kids, their behavior is so much louder for us adults, but that hiding behavior is just as painful. And for me, that's the freeze. That's those kids that freeze, and they're in that same hurtful, scary place. And so acknowledging that, I think, is of equal importance. Yeah, I hope that looped it back for you in that long roundabout circle of security. Take the training if you haven't. Promotion there.
Thank you, Nancy. That's great. That my mind is full with just thinking about those concepts and how each child communicates their pain differently too. You know, sometimes I think that the loud kids are just trying to drown out their worries and be louder than the worry and the, you know, whatever hard thing that they're dealing with. But those shy kids, those quiet kids, they just have a different way of dealing with it.
Yeah, yeah. And then going back to that poem that Allison read us, thinking about how it is that all the different ways that we can allow kids to communicate, all the different ways we can give them language. I raised a very willful, huge tantruming daughter, pushed my every button, who has turned into a beautiful, delightful, once we got past 5, we could be human and life was good. Before that, it was horrible. To everyone in the outside world, she seemed like the dream child. And then, you know, I thought, oh my God, what's going on here? I've got this crazy kid. Because in my house, I don't see that really nice, sweet little girl that everybody else gets to know. And when she was upset, verbal language, even though that is her skill set, verbal language was not her way she exhibited it. And at 2 years old, I taught her to journal, and journaling at that time for most of her journals was black or red crayons, coloring that whole page as dark as she could. So think about too, allowing kids a variety of ways to express their language. Her son, interestingly enough, how things go around is very similar to how she was. I kind of chuckle sometimes. And his mode of expressing is through his building. And you can tell kind of where he's at through what he builds. So kids will tell you in all different ways the message they're trying to give you. And the more we can give them a variety of tools to use to speak to us, I think, what a gift. What a gift. Anyway, I see we're really close to out of time. Any last questions and I hope this was helpful.
Again, feel free to put any questions or comments into the chat box or unmute and ask Nancy here. Also, I know that these are some really deep thoughts, and some of the questions might come to you all later, and we're definitely here for that. We'll provide a recording so that you can re-listen if you'd like, and you can definitely reach out and start a conversation about these topics. We'd be happy to hold that conversation.
Yeah. Glad it was helpful, Megan. I just remembered there was one other website that I kind of wanted to share with folks, not specifically on this topic, but one that I think is super, super helpful. It's called CEPL, which stands for, it's an acronym, and I always have to write it down because I never remember. Center on the Social Emotional Foundations of Early Learning. Anyway, thanks for putting that link in the chat. This is an amazing website, and everything on there is free, easily accessible. Once you log on, if you scroll down in the middle of the page, there's a section that says for teachers, for caregivers, for parents. You can access any of those links, and in there you find free trainings. It's all around social, emotional, and behaviors. Very highly regarded website in infant mental health world. They also have something there called social stories, and it's a way to write a story to deal with a particular behavior, and they will, it's a super powerful tool, and they will take you through. There are some pre-written ones for some behaviors that are very common, and they'll also take you through how to write a specific one for a specific behavior that you're experiencing. So the curriculum we use is wide and assorted. I was talking about Circle of Security, which is a parenting philosophy. So we use that. We also use emerging curriculum, which really looks at observing children and then making your curriculum fit what their interests are. That poem and a lot of what I bring to staff is from Reggio or Reggio Emilio, which is a world-renowned preschool training center in Italy, in Reggio Emilio, Italy. And I was just reading about the starting of that, and it was super interesting to me. It came out after World War II, and it was led by parents' desire to have children raised to be thinkers and to not just follow blindly, because they had seen what happened in Italy during World War II, and they wanted a new and different population, which I thought was super interesting. So those are kind of all of the things we tap into in our Relief Nursery curriculum. In our home visiting, we do a curriculum called Growing Great Kids, Growing Great Families. Yeah, which is a very evidence-based structured curriculum. I hope I hit whichever one you were wondering about. Any other questions?
I think Nancy, in Sherry's question, she was asking about access to the curriculum. Is maybe you could share about exploring the Growing Great Kids, if there's any access to that.
I think that you can do their website and get a general overview of what that is. All of our classroom staff have been trained in that and have access to that curriculum, and I know that they would be happy to share that with anyone. It's a curriculum based totally on attachment and activities that families can do without purchasing. So they use a lot of recycled materials to make toys and things like that, to give parents the concept that you don't have to spend money to be a great parent. And it came out of Hawaii. There was a national study on home visiting programs that were successful and why in the long term. And this one outshone everybody else. So they had these women develop it and provide training now. From what I understand, it's an expensive training. I've gone through it myself. I was super impressed with it, and I'm not a structured curriculum lover because I like to think outside the box. And for me, the fun of teaching is the thinking part. But this curriculum was really pretty fabulous. Yeah, so please feel free to either reach out to me. Rachel, you can share my contact information, and or any teacher can share their curriculum books. They're all over our centers. with you. Yeah. And great. Look forward to having you as a volunteer.
Yeah, I was going to chime in and say Sherry will be joining us in our classrooms. So I feel like she will have opportunity